Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am so honored to be speaking with Hamilton Souther, who's joining us in Iquitos, Peru right now. Hi, Hamilton. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Beth. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure.
I can't wait to get into it. I've got some really good questions for you, and I've been wanting to connect with you for a while, so thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you, especially coming from Iquitos with good internet. This is amazing.
The world's getting interconnected now. Things are improving on the technology side, but I'm not sure it's improving on all the uses of it.
Well, I would actually love to get into that. I know when you said so the jungle is getting a little more connected now, and I'm trying to be okay with this, at peace with what is, but please let me know there's one place left untouched on planet Earth.
I think sadly that planet Earth is from the outside in getting encapsulated in every single form and way that we can. And we have to figure out some way to embrace this. But it's difficult on the emotional side many times for sure.
Yeah, the jungle is one of my favorite places to not get any service or see any light or even see an airplane overhead. But I'm sure that's changed by now since the last time I was there. But we'll get into it. I'm going to tell people a little bit about you if they don't know who you are. So in 2002, at the age of 23, after graduating university in anthropology, Hamilton opened Blue Morpho, the first healing center in the Peruvian Amazon, focusing on Amazonian natural medicine and the sustainable use of Amazonian visionary medicines. He is one of the first Westerners to be accepted into an Amazonian traditional plant medicine lineage, and is the first person in this field to be globally covered by Western media, including National Geographic Adventure, The New York Times, Oprah Magazine, and Time Magazine. Blue Morpho has hosted thousands of plant medicine and psychedelic ceremonies with thousands of people around the world. So Hamilton, I would love to hear your story. I mean, I've heard it before, but for people who don't know, how did you get into this, open up one of the, what I would call the OGs. It was the very first ayahuasca center I had heard about a long time ago. How'd you get onto this path, and were you on a completely different path at one point in your career?
Yeah, I started my career in this. I had an early awakening and calling ultimately to plant medicines in my early 20s before it became a thing. And now it's becoming quite a thing, which is amazing after 20 years of going from something that, was relatively or almost completely unknown to now something that is in the cultural zeitgeist and part of this massive transformation that's happening. But in my case, the awakening led me to seeking answers for the shifts in consciousness that I was experiencing and the opening up to concepts like spirit as being something real. And I found my way down to the Amazon, and I ended up in an ayahuasca ceremony. And in that first ceremony, I had about 4 to 6 hours of continuous visions. And part of it at the end was that I was going to stay in that part of the forest, and I was ultimately going to learn and train there.
Wow. That's fascinating. So I'm curious, did you just stay and answer that call, or was there a part of you that was like, no, I need to get back to, real life, to JOB, that kind of thing?
No, I stayed to answer the call. It was interesting to think about how the first concept was just, how am I going to live down there? And, I started asking if we could ultimately bring people on jungle adventure and just share the journey out to where we were living. It was so remote, like you said, when we were first talking, a place without roads, without electricity, without any other kind of connectivity, and no planes in the sky. It was like that. And so that was just such an amazing place to be able to go into this, untouched forest and be able to just live there in harmony with nature, that to take people to do that similar kind of adventure was where we started while I started to apprentice. And so it allowed us a way to be able to, go back and forth between the cities and to that area of the forest. It gave me an opportunity to be able to apprentice and live there, and also be able to share a little bit of that beauty with others.
Wow. It's so incredible how this, and this was the early days, right? Before it became this big thing. I'm curious, I had first heard about Blue Morpho A friend of mine went there, I think about 4 or 5 years before I first drank medicine. I didn't hear about his experience till after I had drank medicine, which was about 10 years ago. And, what I heard sounded scary as shit to me. It was like, oh, I saw a snake in the river and I'm never going back there. And that was just, again, this was years after he had been. But I'm curious, what was it like building a retreat center, especially in the early days? There's a lot of listeners who dream of having a healing center. It's something I actually hear about a lot. This is everybody's calling, is to build something. I'd like to hear about the realities of opening one, especially as a Westerner coming into Peru.
Yeah, the realities behind opening a plant medicine center is very real. You get confronted immediately with an incredible amount of reality that I think is something that a lot of people are trying to escape when they first think of this. Fundamentally, the way it fits into the modern society is a business. And so, unless you have funding coming from other sources, it's the services that you provide that ultimately are the funding to be able to keep going. And because of that, the government expects you to act and operate like a business. And that includes all different kinds of licenses and permits and inspections and interaction and running an administrative office and interacting with financial institutions, et cetera. And so there's really no way around that aspect of life. It comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility. You're in a foreign country and, Peru has, if you're in Peru, there are many other countries where this is happening. They have extensive laws. Blue Morpho is governed by over 10 ministries of the local government, and you have to comply in all those different kinds of ways. And that's just then the beginning of it. That's just the structure around it. Then you have to, navigate the part that's actually the interaction with people and the hospitality side, the booking side, and getting people there. And then the safety side around it, I think, is a massive concern, which is, how do you manage people coming into these remote areas, spending time there, utilizing plant medicines, and then ultimately going back home. And then you have the management of staff and ultimately running a place for people to come and live for a period of time. And so that's like an extended stay hotel. And you have all of the different things that come with that as well. And then you have staff, and you get to deal with staff, and they're not involved in the medicine. And so you're dealing with all the normal things associated with now having a staff. And so you kind of layer upon layer upon layer of a lot of reality. But if you're dedicated to the plant medicine and you really feel it's your calling and you love that kind of interaction, then all the other things that you do to ultimately support that are worth it. And it's something that really helps fulfill that calling and is something incredibly beautiful. I think if you're fantasizing about it, then before you get involved, there needs to be a reality check around how much it really takes. And I've seen that over 20 years. There are very few centers that have survived just the onslaught of all the different difficulties that somebody could have. And we've watched over 100 centers in our area of the forest come and go. And so, it's a tremendous investment in time, effort, energy, and creativity. And so it has to be a true calling, I think. Otherwise, it's better to use these medicines to really support and benefit the growth in your life, but look how to fit into your life in another way.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to point out that you use the word business because, me as a business coach, and, if I had $1 for every time I heard someone say I would dream of opening a healing center, can you help me? And the first thing I say is like, well, there's these realities of the fact that it is a business. There is money involved. And there is a lot of romanticizing the medicine as like, oh, but it should just be for the people and it's free and it's plants and, and then there's the reality of investors and, like you said, safety and staffing. I'm curious, do you have any stories about maybe wanting to give up or quit or potentially, at some point losing it all? Because again, I hear this all the time that there's this dream. And when I've interviewed other people who've opened centers, there's sometimes 7 figures involved, investors and safety and then things that go wrong. I'm curious, were there any really hard times along the way? I mean, I'm sure there were.
Yeah, I think that there are hard times all the time. It started hard, and I don't think it's gotten very much easier. Although I think about it all the time, and I wonder if life's really easier for anybody else as well. I'm not sure it is in that sense. And so, I question that aspect of it often. But the difficulties that you come across are, especially if you operate for a very long time, you have to think like the difficulties that we had in year 1 to 5 are different than the difficulties you have from year 5 to 15, which are then different than the difficulties in 15 to 20, 22 years. You always question, are you on the right path? Is this really what you need to be doing? I think those are what they call the tests. Those are the tests of virtue or the tests of spirit that come through any kind of path. And you have to ask yourself if you're really truly dedicated to the path of medicine and to the path of healing and what that looks like. I think that, we hear in spiritual circles, Eastern philosophies, these idea of these lifelong paths and how romanticized that seems until you realize that that means your path includes everything that happens in a life, including getting older, illnesses, tragedies, global pandemics, things that you just didn't plan on, and then how you're going to ultimately navigate that. I think you have all of that as part of the experience. And so, yes, there were times that got very difficult. Yes, there were times where I thought we might not be able to make it. And then there were times where even we had to close down, like during the COVID pandemic, and then question whether we would ever reopen. And I'm thankful to be able to say that we were able to last October, and things now are better than ever. But it is an amazing journey to lead and operate a center like this.
Thank you for sharing. And thanks for the commitment to the medicine, because I do want to point out that you said it has to be this deeper connection, right? It's not just, oh, let me open a healing center because I'm charging $5,000 per person, I'm going to make millions. It's like, what is the intention behind it? But let's get into some questions about the medicine and the kind of people that go there to Blue Morpho and what you guys have going on and coming up. I'm curious, as ayahuasca, I'm sure, has increased in popularity and awareness, and I'm sure your business has increased if you say it's been better than ever and now people are coming back. I'm curious, over especially the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, why are people coming all the way down there for medicine? Do you see a common thread of what's happening in the human, the human psyche or the intention of the humans that are being called to go all the way to Peru to work with medicine? Is there a common thread that's pulling people there?
Yeah, there's been a common thread for 20 years. When we got started, it came around really people looking to have a better life and the plants awakening them to an extraordinary form of creativity of how to have that. Early on, we were really focused on mental health and mental health intervention simply because ayahuasca as a plant medicine was identified, 20 years ago to be a great treatment for depression, anxiety, PTSD, and addiction. And so that's where we got the, first global coverage and publications around our work was fundamentally about, those kinds of treatments. Over the years, things have shifted a little bit, though, because people are now awakening to the idea that plant medicines can be used really for human optimization, improvement, and success. And so we're seeing this influx of people that are coming that are looking to take their lives to the next level. They're looking to, open up to a greater understanding and a more holistic version of success. And they might have already had successes in certain parts of their life, but now they're looking at life from that more holistic vision and thinking like, well, they want to have success in family, in business, financially, spiritually, and in their own personal development. And so I think that that's a real expansion that's taking place within the plant medicine field and realms. And I think it's actually really healthy for it to see that it's not just only treatment of illnesses or the difficult parts of life, but it's also a means to be able to fulfill even a greater vision or a greater desire that someone has for their life.
Beautiful. And I always love to point out, what's really at the root of all the depression, the anxiety, the feelings that people feel unfulfilled or something's wrong. It's like, well, maybe it's not actually just the depression. Maybe it's actually that disconnection or, like misalignment in your career or, you've only gotten this far with, your family and you want to go deeper or whatever it is. And that's kind of where my calling came in was this, I was already a business coach. I was deep on the medicine path. And I started to notice this disconnection between people going and drinking a lot of ayahuasca, but going back to the same old, the same job, the same career, the same world. And then nothing would change. Even after years of sitting with medicine. And I started to notice, well, wait, aren't these medicines supposed to be opening our heart and reconnecting us to our truest selves and find this path of what is really living inside of us, this path of purpose. And so that's where I was inspired to make, I've made a few series around psychedelic sacred medicines and purpose. But I'm curious, do you see a lot of people who are maybe caught up in the wrong career and who have been doing it just for, the reasons that they've been told, or maybe they've gotten to midlife and realized, well, there's a deeper part of me that's not fulfilled, like you said, successes. And how do you feel that medicine helps people with this? Like, have you seen a lot of people wanting to change their career after being at Blue Morpho?
Yeah, over the years, people come and they get all different kinds of opportunities to change. I think that people need to treat it that way, not the magic bullet concept. You go into ceremony and it shakes things up. The metaphor I like to use is like a snow globe. Inside your consciousness, it takes on a shape and a form. You bring in, you use the plant medicines to shake it all up. You get an opportunity to witness that experience, which I think is phenomenal compared to other kinds of medicines, because you actually go through the treatment process itself in a very lucid, very intense kind of way. And through that process, now you've broken fixations, you've removed blockages, you've awakened to realizations and ideas of changes that you need to make. And now they all have to be implemented and they have to be integrated. And I think that that's really the big piece that people are misunderstanding, that it's not I come and drink the plant medicine so that they'll do things for me and then I'm done, but rather I come to drink the plant medicines as the start of something that's now going to be a really incredible long journey and maybe even a lifelong journey. I think that if you come to a week of ayahuasca in any kind of retreat, you're probably looking at anywhere from 6 months to a year of direct manifestation and change associated with that you have to keep up with, that you have to nurture, and you have to really build within yourself. And if you really extend that, it could even last 2, 3, 4, 5 years of modifying your life based on just 1 week of experiences with the plant medicines. So I think that, there might be a little bit of misinformation out there about people thinking that they could go on a weekend retreat, drink in a ceremony or two, receive this download and transference of understanding, and the journey's over, and now they can go back to their life and receive all the benefits. But it's more like you go back into your life and you get the opportunity to receive the benefits by making changes that now make sense for you. And that's a process that I think needs to be guided and really looked at little by little. Some people want to make drastic changes, like an immediate career change. And it's, typically with things as something as big as a career or a very long-term relationship, there's a lot more going on than just making that change. You might need to get new forms of education or licensing to be able to make that change. You might need to, change the social circles you're in to be able to make that possible, et cetera. And so I really think that those kinds of changes are more step by step and little by little. And then I think you can get incredible results from using the plant medicines in that way.
Yeah, and this is you said very important things here, nurturing it. So I am literally living my Dieta vision from 2016. And I always like to point that out to my clients where I'm like, I had just this one moment. Obviously, it wasn't one moment. It was years and years of knowing. But then it was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go and do this. And it's like manifestation, but it's taken a lot of work, showing up, integration, support, somatic work. Do you see this often where maybe people do think that the plants are just going to do it and then they go back and then they complain like nothing changed, and what goes wrong? What is it that, where's the disconnect? Because I kept seeing this for years in my own community where people would come and drink and nothing would change. Where do you feel like there is that disconnect between, maybe investing into 1 or 2 weeks at Blue Morpho and then a year later, nothing's really different or not much is different? What goes wrong there?
Sure. I think the first thing that goes wrong is misunderstanding that the plants are there to be in service to you. And it's really a relationship that forms and develops, and they're there to be able to support and help you. But the plants are autonomous in their own right within the Amazonian cultures. And so it's all about relationship and earning the favor of them to be able to want to continue to help you. So I think if a lot of people come down with an appropriated attitude and they think they can just drink the plants and they're going to go home having, received this sort of blessing from the plants and this bestowed wisdom, I don't think it fundamentally one works that way. The second piece that I think people go wrong with is that they don't understand that the problems that they have in their life are interwoven into how they live. And so as you get an opportunity to witness and sort of go through that teasing apart of all the different things going on between your mindset, your diet, your sleep patterns, your friend patterns, your relationship patterns, your sexual patterns, literally the way you spend your time, how you use digital devices, like literally everything. As you take that all apart, there are a lot of people who just don't want to have that experience ultimately disrupted. So they say, as part of their experiences, I want to go get help. But if help meant I have to go rebuild the entirety of my life in a new way, they ultimately don't want that help. It's not something that they're going to be able to do. I think other people also get caught up in different kinds of habits, and that the habits just persist, and that you would actually need many more plant medicine interventions along that way, and some kind of guidance or coaching, which is what the traditional medico vegetalistas or shamans would provide during that time, kind of on a weekly or bi-monthly basis, to be able to just interject and share some ideas and pointers about how to continue that evolution and that evolving process. So I think those are some of the places that people maybe misinterpret what the plants can do for them going in, and then don't have the results that they're looking for.
And I would like to emphasize that you pointed out relationship. I mean, it's an interactive relationship, right? It's the spirit of a plant. And like you said, we're not here to just use and appropriate without, putting in the return effort, into our lives. Speaking of which, I want to get into some controversy, because I've been hearing this for years. Even just yesterday, I think it was, I posted someone I interviewed who serves medicine, who is a white woman based in California. And there's some comment on the YouTube about, this is wrong, you're appropriating this culture. And I would love to hear what you think about this. I'm sure you've heard this before. There are people out there that believe, you shall not work with medicine or pour the medicine or serve the medicine unless you are of an indigenous lineage, or whatever it is. I've heard everything, by the way. And I've now heard, like, if you have white skin, you are not allowed to, like, to that extreme. What do you say to this? Because this is something that's come up a lot in not just in the medicine world, but the world. And, how do we get into right relationship with this? I mean, I have my own views on this. I've talked about it very publicly, but I'm curious, what is your response? And I'm assuming this has come up for you at least once, right?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty common topic. The way I look at it is that all of these questions are fundamentally more complex than you can put into a binary argument. And so you have to look at the situation itself with a lot more sophistication than this is good, or this is right, or this is wrong, or you can do this and someone else can't do it. When I went to the Amazon, plant medicines were not something of great interest, and the culture was dying around them. And the young indigenous people and the young mestizo lineages were no longer interested in carrying on the lineages from grandfather to father to son, or grandmother to mother to daughter. And they were actually already dying to shampoo, razors, earbuds, MP3 players, sunglasses, and anything else that could be considered cool and easy, including aspirin and other kinds of Western pill medicine. And so when I got there, it was actually something that was not interesting to the people. It wasn't cool. And the young people were not interested in it. And so one of the things that we ended up doing was actually reviving that aspect of their culture. And we brought that revival to the indigenous, we brought it to the mestizo lineages, and we brought it to the global stage, that there's tremendous merit and value within these cultures. Now, what that allowed was for a blossoming within the indigenous cultures to have a new form of purpose. And one of those purposes has been to share their medicine gifts and their knowledge with people from other cultures from all over the world. And so if you really didn't want to share the medicine, the indigenous people would need to say not only, people from other cultures shouldn't be allowed to serve it, but people from other cultures can't participate at all, period. So there's a bit of a catch-22 in that as you start to share the medicine, you can't control what people do with it. So one of the common threads in people having plant medicine experiences is they come out of it with very little training and they say, the plants told me I can now serve it. Well, what do you do with that? You can't stop them. It now has happened simply from sharing that medicine with other people. And so I think as you look at this argument about, who should and shouldn't be people involved in the space, I think first of all, we need to look at an idea of who's actually trained or capable of being able to share this medicine. So even within the indigenous circles, the indigenous don't allow untrained indigenous to share the medicine. They're not the sacred keepers of the medicine. Then, on the contrary, the people go through extensive apprenticeships that are harder in many ways than even Western medical school. And they include aspects that are in some case life-threatening to be able to even practice their medicine, to be able to prove themselves worthy of it. Then they go through a process very similar to residency, where there's just an unbelievable amount of service and practice. And then ultimately they get the title of master or teacher or head of their tribe. And then they get the responsibility of taking care of everybody for the rest of their lives. And so I don't see that being replicated in the Western models associated with this. And I think that that's fundamentally first the most important thing for a growing industry as important as the plant medicine one, simply because it's a whole genre and space of new medicines that are really able to help people from all over the world. The medicines seem to be able to help people of any skin color. So I don't understand that aspect of it either. If we were going to just dissect this and bifurcate it into these groups can and those groups can't, why does everybody get really the same benefits from it? And so I don't think that fits either into the nature of that argument. If we look at cultural appropriation or misappropriation, I think that comes from here. Like, what are you doing with the culture, and why is your expression of that culture ultimately predatory? So we came here, we supported the nature of the culture, we continue to support the nature of the culture. The majority of our employees are local people. We've added to the overall economy that's going on in this area. We have a very respected position in the local society, and we've never had any conflict with any indigenous groups. Now, as a caveat to that, and kind of in addition, early on in my training, I actually worked as the healer for an indigenous lineage. And so I was invited as a foreigner by the indigenous because I had an opportunity to heal the grandson of the chief of the tribe. And they needed a healer in that moment, and I was the only one in the vicinity in the area. And I healed the grandson of the chief without even knowing that the child was the grandson of the chief. And then the next day, the chief and this whole group of people came in canoes up to my house and came and spoke to me and said, "You're going to now be the medicine man of our tribe." And so I don't think that the tribes have these same attitudes if they would allow something like that to happen. So when I look at these questions, I think they're very complex. I think we need a tremendous amount of compassion and sophistication. We need to support the local tribes. We need to share our wisdom with them as they share their wisdom with us. And we need to understand that we're becoming a global society, and we have to ultimately transcend tribalism.
This is a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. Because it's interesting the time I've spent down there, which is mostly with mestizo cultures, which is also another reality, is that there's this illusion that, there's just indigenous people are the medicine carriers and they live off the land. And I'm like, no, they actually have motorcycles and buy things and need money just like most human beings. And, I've talked about this before on other episodes, but to also know that, what's at the root of all this? Well, what do we all want on planet Earth? Unity, love, compassion, a more beautiful world that we all know is possible. And I don't really believe it's about being divisive because, like you said, the plants don't see the color. The plants don't see, oh, well, this is only for certain people who live in certain regions who come from this lineage, that's been passed down through generations. I do, and maybe you would agree, believe that this medicine is gaining popularity and coming out, spreading the vine all over the world, for a reason. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'm projecting, human being with making sense out of things, but there's a reason why there's a demand, why there's seekers, why there's people looking for this, and why it has spread out. And you said something very important about the training and the facilitators. Now, I actually was going to ask you about that question. I've asked a lot of people who are ayahuasqueros this question about what happens when you drink the medicine. It tells you that you're now supposed to go serve it, which seems to happen a lot. It's funny. It's never happened to me over 10 years and hundreds of ceremonies. But what do you think is really going on? And I've always wondered how much of this is the human ego versus the truth of you are actually called to serve, and how does one be discerning?
Well, I think like anything else, you have to ask yourself if you're prepared. And in our lineage, the way we knew we were prepared to be able to serve on our own is that you had to have all of the skills that you would need to be able to fulfill all of the needs of somebody without intervention from anybody else or any other support group. And so for us, when we would go through that, we would have to have envision the support of the plant spirits, and they would have to say, now you're ready, you've been trained. You would have to have the support from the people who trained you, the maestros who actually took you through your apprenticeship. They would have to agree that they had also received the same message from the plant spirits and that they agreed that you were ready. And then you also had to have the same thing happen for you. So in your visions, you had to be told by the plant spirits that you were now ready. And you also had to know within yourself, rationally and logically, that you could handle literally anything and everything that could come up in that ceremony. And you would have to be able to handle it with a kind of visionary tool that you had learned during your training. So in my mind, that's a very deep, very, very personal way of understanding that you have the qualifications necessary. And there was no time limit put on that. So it wasn't that it was impossible that somebody could do it in a very short period of time. I went through the formal part of my apprenticeship in under 2 years, which is at that time unheard of. But it was about 120, 130 ceremonies and many dietas during that time. And then I was given the opportunity to serve with an understanding that I would start a new phase, which was called a maturation phase. So it was like, okay, yes, you've graduated from this level, but now you start a whole nother level and you're at the baseline foundation of that level. And now you're going to learn that through work with other people and by serving medicine. And you're capable of keeping them safe and being able to do the healing work necessary. But now you're also going to learn through that process. That process has lasted over 15 years and it's still going. So even though the original part of my apprenticeship was very short in time, very much longer than people who have had less than a week of experience and think they're ready, the actual maturation phase has taken a very, very long time. And it's been a very powerful, very amazing series of experiences. So when I look at other people who don't have that same level of experience, they haven't been through traditional apprenticeship, I think you have really kind of two options. One option is that it is coming from their ego. It's considered a test of virtue. They need to tell the medicine, yes, I will be a server of this, but I'm not ready. Please train me. So it says, hey, go do it. And you're supposed to say, no. It's like the exact opposite logic of someone forcing you to put on a seatbelt. Like the seatbelt's in the car and someone comes and says, you don't need to use the seatbelt. And you say, no, it's there for a reason. I'm going to use the seatbelt. Right? So the ayahuasca will use that kind of logic all the time in its training, where it comes and it gives you a test and you either pass the test or you fail the test. And often it'll say things like, hey, go do that. Like the adage, go jump off a bridge. Would you do it? You're supposed to say no, at that moment. So, I think that a lot of people have embraced different aspects of the teachings. And ultimately from that, you have a transference of culture and ego. You also have in that situation and a shifting of the time about these medicines, and you have a shifting in culture about their uses. And I think you have to embrace that understanding that it's not staying the same. And so I questioned for a long time, what really is the service that's being provided, because it's not the same service. If you have somebody sitting with you that has even just 100 ceremonies of experience, it's not the same service as sitting with an elder that has 1,000 ceremonies or 2,000 ceremonies of experience. And so I wanted to try to understand what is that service that they're providing. And it might be more community, or it might be allowing the plants to be the cleansing agent themselves, or there might be other support structures available, like calling emergency medical support because you're in an environment that has that or something, and you can offer, other kinds of care and support that you wouldn't be able to if you were on your own or in an indigenous community in the Amazon. So I think we have to accept that things change. We have to understand that some people have tremendous ego involved, and it's your responsibility to not participate in medicine with an egomaniac. It's not their responsibility to not offer you the opportunity. And so I think that's also another test of virtue, and we talk about that all the time, which is how do you find a good shaman and say, well, preferably don't go drink with an egomaniac who doesn't have a lot of training. It doesn't have probably the highest probability of turning out well.
It's funny. I just had this conversation earlier today with a client of mine. Yeah. And, I do want to point out, because I've heard this for years from people like, oh, I'm being called to the medicine. Here's how I've seen any call through the medicine, even what I'm doing now. I was already a coach, had numerous visions. They went on for almost 3 years straight, and I actually just I kept saying no. I was like, there's no way that's not real. That's just some, illusion coming through. And then I just kind of started getting curious, maybe I should make a psychedelic summit. Maybe one day, I don't know, not now. That went on for about 3 years until I finally was like, okay, and again, there's other ways to serve the medicine without serving actual medicine. There's integration, there's coaching, there's other forms of healing, there's therapy, there's, just having reverence. Go make money with your other business and go buy a piece of land in the Amazon that's about to be torn down by large-scale agriculture, which, by the way, I have a nonprofit that if anyone wants to donate to. But you know what I mean? It's like we can be of service in other ways. But this is, my next question is about, so Blue Morpho is about to offer some kind of a training program. And I know I've actually interviewed Carlos Tanner at the Ayahuasca Foundation, asked a very similar question about, well, can someone really be trained in 6 weeks? And is that what it's all about? And I'm curious, what do you envision for your, I think, new training program, and what's it about? Who's it for? And is it for someone who wants to serve medicine in 6 weeks?
Yeah, Blue Morpho Academy is kind of what we think of as the next generation of training people in the plant medicine space. We look at the psychedelic renaissance that's taking place, and we know that there's a great need for education, and traditional societies are very guarded about the education that they offer. And so the Academy is really about meeting people where they are in their education needs and providing them first with a foundation and a standardization of what we would just think of as good practice. And there are a lot of sitters and a lot of coaches already that are very skilled in their art and their craft, but they're not familiar with psychedelics or plant medicines, and they're not yet trained in how to deal with their clients or work with their clients who might now be diving into the world of psychedelics and plant medicines. So I think in a 6-week, 8-week, or 3-month course, you could teach the foundations and the basics, and you could teach best practices and teach somebody how to be able to offer really good advice about the plant medicines and what somebody could experience if they're in a business coaching program and now they're starting to use psilocybin because they've heard it's good for creativity. Well, somebody could learn about dose and safety plans and protocols and right set and setting and how to go about it, and the right way to set up the experience to have the best possible chances of benefits. But I don't see that person serving the medicine. I don't see them actually taking it, dosing it, preparing it, and giving that to another person and then being fully responsible for them through their experiences. So to address that, the Academy is breaking the roles down into 4 different key roles. There's the sitter. the coach, the facilitator, and the master facilitator. And to give you just a general idea, we think a sitter can be trained within 2 to 3 months, and we think a master facilitator can be trained within 4 to 6 years. And so, between that is the amount of time that we think is probably pretty average for somebody to go about learning. And in the case of the role of the sitter is literally that, a sitter, a person to be there, not take the medicine, be able to support somebody who's going through that experience, knows the right things to say, knows the right way to be able to support somebody, knows what to do if something goes wrong, knows how to have an emergency plan, et cetera. And I would expect that they already come with some skills, either from psychology or from coaching, et cetera. As you get into what it takes to really be a facilitator and be able to facilitate with these medicines, the key issue is your personal experience. And so it's not something that you can learn theoretically or conceptually. It's something that you have to do. And that's why it takes so much time. And so I think we can create a foundation level of understanding. We can create courses that you can do online. We have tools that are now available to us so that we can create a foundation of understanding and standardization around that. And then on top of that, you have to develop your art. You have to develop what is truly unique to you and why you're a sacred healer or a sacred carrier of these medicines. And I think for a baseline facilitator, you're probably looking at 2 years, maybe 3 years of training. And like I say, to then take that to mastery is perfecting all of those skills that you've been through and hundreds of plant medicine experiences. And so it would really require true dedication during that period of time. But I think that people will really embrace this as a career and take it very seriously, like other careers, dedicate their time to it. It's an incredibly fun learning process. Experiential learning is really a tremendous joy. And so I think that way we can address the basic needs that are found within the community right now, and also support the people that are looking to take their own practice to that next level.
That sounds great. And I'm curious, is it going to be only in person, or is it a hybrid kind of program?
Yeah, Blue Morph Academy is a hybrid. We're utilizing online education, and I've been making online courses since about 2012. And so we're going to be utilizing really what's state of the art for our online education. And the desire there is to be able to create this foundation. I think that one of the problems that the industry faces right now is that there isn't a standardization around best practices. So we need to break that down into a standardization of best practices and bring it into the cultural zeitgeist so that people just know this is how to be safe. This is how to minimize risk. This is the way to maximize positive outcome and really fulfill the intentions that we have going into these experiences in the first place. And so I think what that will do is help raise the quality of the industry as a whole, as a global whole. It'll just start to little by little raise the quality of what's in the industry. And then from there, as that happens, people will look to have a career, a legitimate career. And as the industry develops, there will be many different career levels. And so not everybody's going to want to be a master facilitator, or are they really skilled or appropriate for that role. But there will be many different roles that will happen as these different kinds of centers build out around the world to support people interested in these experiences. And so as that goes on, with this core foundation that everybody now has of best practice, people can get the individual expertise that they need in the roles that they're looking for.
This is great, because this has actually come up so often that there's no standard, there's no code of ethics. We've seen everything, right? We've seen the shaman that dates the participant who's 30 years younger, and right after a ceremony, we've seen sexual abuse. There's definitely issues. And then, to your other point is experiential, right? I personally had someone pay me for help, and I actually gave her money back because she said she wanted to go into it was a long story, but she wanted to give people psilocybin because she's been giving people ketamine, but she's never actually tried psilocybin before. And there was this part of me that's like, well, like some of the best training is your own, right? It's not mind training. Anybody could read a book or understand how psychedelics work and what goes on in the brain. But the real healing is embodied. It's not this mind teaching experience, which, we're seeing a lot of these training programs out there don't have a lot of experiential, and they don't have a lot of, like these other aspects brought to them. And I think this is going to have to change, because we're going to see potential harm. Maybe, who knows? But I have some other questions about where you think this future of the medicine space, the psychedelic world, the world in general, where it's all going. Before we were on camera, I was having a slight heart attack about, the fact that there's now Wi-Fi out in the jungle. But, and I've come to embrace all that is, meaning like, we don't know exactly what you've been saying. We don't know what's right or wrong. We don't know what's good or bad. And who are we to say? Because it just is. And, evolution happens. But in the psychedelic space, it's been so interesting because it's been growing so fast. There's, legalization now happening. There's training programs left and right. Do you feel that this is all going in what we would call a positive direction? And do you have any concerns for, this growth in an interest in plant medicine and psychedelics? Do you have any concerns about where it might be going?
Yeah, I think that the psychedelic industry is forming, and when that happens, it's a mixed bag, and we have to be discerning and helpful to the positive sides of that, and we need to work also together to minimize the negative sides of it. You touched upon the cultural divides that are forming and the attitudes and opinions about that. Well, that doesn't help the globalization and legalization of plant medicines as a viable form of medicine for people around the world. Then there's the question around sacred cultivation and who should be cultivating this medicine and supporting that. And there has to be sustainable cultivation. Just like we need sustainable food supply, we need sustainable medicine supply as well. And so, those are just two points to touch on. There's the question around education that we've talked about, and where do we actually get best practices? Because of the laws that we've had that have been suppressing the expansion and study of these medicines, science is now just being allowed to catch up, but the medicines have been ostracized from science and scientific study for decades. And so there's a lack of scientific understanding that needs to come to this. And whenever science gets brought to something, it also opens up a tremendous number of positives and also a number of concerns. At the same time, we have to look at the economics of it as well. The economics are incredible. There are now funds with billions of dollars that are being poured into research companies to try to figure out better ways to monetize and ultimately make money and industry out of plant medicines. So as all of that continues to take place and the industry grows from a multi-billion-dollar industry to hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars of value, we have to look at the core values that started the industry in the first place, and we need to preserve those values. And I think that that's been important for any society, but it's unbelievably important for something that has such a direct effect on our mind. And so what makes the medicine so powerful is that they can help us change the way we think in a way that is a medicine. They heal the way that we think. They help us live in a way that has the mind in a calmer, happier, better, ultimately better place, and more, better cognition. Microdosing programs have been proven to improve cognition, etc. So if you have something that has such direct access, you also need to understand how to be able to steward the industry around it and the use of that in a culture that is really about the positives and about the responsibility necessary for that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for addressing all those points. You mentioned that there's billions or potentially billions of dollars going into this, and maybe it's going to be, big pharma or, large companies, or maybe even regulated, patented, new compounds. I've been hearing everything. I mean, how do you feel about when it comes to even, this one's come up in conversation, the ayahuasca chocolates where you don't purge? I don't even know what they are. I just hear about them. I don't really pay much attention. But do you feel like this is, if this is for the benefit of the greater good, maybe on some level, is this okay? Even though it's extracting and maybe even, there's not sustainable harvesting involved. And then there's maybe a plant put in the jungle and they're popping out some ayahuasca chocolates. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But, what are your views on like this kind of extractive way of maybe like approaching the plant medicine world with all that VC money?
Yeah, I think that we have to be realistic about it. And one of the like biggest concerns that I've had from the very beginning of my career in this, as the desire and the mindset around it opened up and people became more interested, was ultimately around the branding. And people call something that isn't ayahuasca, ayahuasca. And people call something that isn't psilocybin mushroom, psilocybin. They call something that isn't Wachuma, San Pedro cactus, Wachuma. And that's just fundamentally mislabeling something. So, ayahuasca analogs, which are different kinds of plants that have similar chemicals that are brought together, is not ayahuasca. That would be like calling any other vegetable by a different vegetable's name. Like, why? It's something that happened in the space that just didn't make any sense to me, but it is of a tremendous concern because it puts the wrong understanding in the minds of the people that don't have enough sophistication about it to be able to discern the difference. Fundamentally, if you take ayahuasca as an example, it's a very specific kind of vine that goes into what they call ayahuasca, even though there are many, many varieties of ayahuasca that are not used in making ayahuasca medicine. So if you walk through the forest, you'll see lots of different kinds of ayahuasca, and only 2 or 3 of them are actually used to produce what we know of as medicines. So I think the moment that you take it out of its natural form, you take it out of the form of a tea, the way the indigenous people created it and used it, it's no longer the same thing. And we need to treat it that way. It's something else. And I don't have a debate about it. I, like you, don't participate in those kinds of experiences. I personally wouldn't eat an ayahuasca chocolate. But I don't know what's happening for the other people that do. And I think it's something that needs to have greater study and understanding applied to it. But to call it ayahuasca, I think, is a misnomer. And to mix it in chocolate is going against all the traditional teachings that tell you to abstain from chocolate and sweets when working with ayahuasca in the form of a tea. So I've heard of these things. I think some of them are incredibly dangerous. Some of them are borderline human experimentation or direct human experimentation. And they need to be treated as such. I would like to think that we could discover new medicines, new analogs, new ways of working with the plants through these processes, but we need to be very careful about how we do that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. It's just kind of interesting to explore how fast everything is changing. And, there's every day I hear about something new. And I do believe everything works itself out somehow. I think either that or maybe we'll all just go extinct a lot faster than we might. But, it is what it is. And I think just having these kind of conversations and educating and also talking about, the indigenous ways or, sustainable harvesting or just the awareness of these medicines and to get it into that balance and also to really know that this is, I believe that this medicine is here for the greater good of all. We're all in this together, whether we want to believe we're separate or on different sides or black versus white, brown versus off-white. It's really, what are we all here for? What are the plants here for? What is the final message? And what does it all come back to? And it's like you said, we can't determine right or wrong or good or bad. It's like, what's at the root of all of this, which I believe is the opening of the human heart, on some level. But I have a couple last questions for you before we go into, where can we find you and what's coming up. If you're willing to share, just a fun question. There's 2 things I'm wondering. Number 1, have you ever dieted or worked with datura? And number 2, if not, do you have any, what's your kind of craziest experience with the medicine? I'm sure there's been a few, but have you had any of those moments of like the ultimate ceremony or the I'm never going to do this again or either one?
Sure. Yes, I've worked with plants similar to datura, which is a kind of brugmansia that goes by the local name toway or angel trumpet vine, which is commonly used in the Amazon. It's incredibly dangerous to start with. It's truly incredibly dangerous, and it's only wielded by people with a tremendous amount of understanding about dose. It's considered something that cannot be used without the supervision of somebody fully trained in it, which is its own kind of medicine practitioner called a toero. I happen to be from a lineage that was trained in 5 different disciplines, and Toei was one of them. It produces incredible visions, but not typically positive ones. It's very hard to wield in a positive medicine way. It can be incredibly distortive, incredibly dissociative, and last for a very long time. The longest I've ever seen somebody in a Toei vision was 4 days. And without coming out of it for 1 minute, it was just 4 days continuous vision. Because of that, it's not recommended for anyone to use. It's typically used as an analog inside or an admixture in ayahuasca down in the Amazon in certain lineages. Some people use it to try to increase the potency of the ayahuasca, which I don't think ayahuasca needs to have the potency increased, but that's sort of the macho attitude that can be given to it. But it is a beautiful medicine in its own right. It's an incredible dreaming plant. It's very, very powerful. It can give incredible color and context and richness to the visionary experience. It can make the visions incredibly defined, but you use a very, very tiny amount added to ayahuasca to do that. And so I think there's a tremendous risk associated with it for overdose. And so you have to just be very, very careful. But ultimately, in my own case, I got my first rankings in our mesa from having to learn how to wield Toei. And, it was an incredible thing for me because then growing up in our gardens, we always had angel trumpet vine. I never knew that it would ultimately be a great teacher plant of mine during my apprenticeship. And I consider it a tremendous friend, a tremendous ally. But I would not recommend it for people to try.
Yeah, no, don't try. I've just always wanted to hear about, I only know you and maybe one other person who's worked with it, and maybe the shaman I work with. But I was always curious to hear about the actual experience. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I've worked with it probably 500 to 700 times. And it was, one of the most intense plants to actually learn how to work with and wield on a consistent basis. To give you an example, if in an ayahuasca ceremony you're feeling like the visionary space is kind of turning on and it's getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I was in a Toei experience. I actually write about it in one of my books. It's available on Amazon, Mystic Secrets of Ayahuasca, Part 2. It's a story of my apprenticeship. But the visionary effects, the energy coming to the ceremony from the Toei looked like huge banks of clouds. Just huge fog banks coming in from all sides. Just dense, huge, miles high, miles deep, thick. And it was just the impact of it. And when it hit that ceremony, it was complete out of body for everybody for hours and hours. It was incredibly intense. You work very, very hard to be able to rein that plant in.
Oh my God. Thank you for sharing. Fascinating and beautiful work. And, definitely a warning for people. Please don't go picking this and trying this on your own. I actually grow, it's not datura, not Toei, but a form of datura. And it grows wildly, supposedly, in the hills of California. So, but let's hear about what you have coming up, where people can find you, maybe shout out your program and how people can learn more about, when it's open and open for registration.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah. So you can come find me at bluemorphotours.com, and the Blue Morpho Academy will be bluemorphoacademy.com. We're launching the Academy website this week. And we'll start early signups in May, and we'll go live with the first groups in June and July. We'll have the certification programs, coaching programs, elite retreats, and we're opening our lodge here in the Amazon for long-term stay and dietas. So if you're interested in having an opportunity to be able to come for longer than just a week-long retreat, which we'll also continue to offer, that will be available through that website. And you can find me on social media at Hamilton Souther on Facebook and Instagram. And Yeah, I'm on Twitter and a bunch of other social sites. So please come and join our newsletter. Come to bluemorphotours.com. Check us out. If you're interested in the Academy, come and write us. And we'd love to have you be in our community and participate in plant medicine with us and continue this amazing journey.
Beautiful. Well, we'll have all the links right here in the show notes so everybody can be in contact. And, let me know when it launches. I'm happy to share it. Thank you so much for your time and being with us today, Hamilton. It was an honor to have you. And thank you most of all to the work you're doing for the planet. Very important.
Thank you, Beth. It's a real pleasure. Wonderful interview. And it's a real honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you.